Howdy, Good Gracious family. This is Boyd Baker with Good Gracious, episode 129, the spring break edition. I am on location in wonderful South Carolina, undisclosed, with family, and just loving life and loving this new podcast. Some really great people here, as well as loving that on May 4th we got another Good Gracious live show. So put on your calendar, May 4th, 8 o'clock, Neighborhood Church. We've got a terrific lineup shaping up, and I will tell you more information about that. But you can go to goodgracioushow.com and get tickets. You should be able to, or at least you will soon. On this episode, I sat down with Michael Halicki from Park Pride. And a lot of people in Atlanta, you might see signs or you might have heard about Park Pride, but I don't know if you realize how much they really do. They're really on a grassroots, community level organizer to help people create amazing spaces. So had a great chat with him, as well as sat down with a musician, Clayton Wyatt, and talked about his music and his kind of desire to cross the pond, play out a little more in Europe and get out there. So I think you're going to like these folks. I hope you enjoy.
My name's Clayton. I play guitar.
Just Clayton like Cher or Madonna?
Clayton Wyatt.
Okay.
Like Wyatt like Earp.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, I play guitar and sing and write songs. And I do have a day job working online as a web designer.
But if you could chuck it all, you'd just be traveling the roads of America playing music.
Traveling the roads of America.
Yeah.
Or Europe.
Yeah.
I'm headed to Europe actually for a little stint out there musically in the summer. So going out to Ireland to visit some family, and then headed out to Germany and England, and I think Scotland's in there somewhere. So
how'd you get set up with a European gig? Did you know you were going with to visit family, and they kind of help make some connections or something?
Yeah, well, so my wife is from Ireland, and so we're going to visit her side of the family, and just once you're over there, like once you're across the ocean.
Yeah, that's the hard part.
Yeah,
right?
That's the hard part. So I figured I would just try to get as many shows as I could, and I've been so I just reached out to several different people and communities, and just hit them up and said, "Hey, can I play here?" And they said, "Sure."
And so, but what? You just asked folks who there? You said, "Can you give me the names of some places?" Or did you ask them to book it for you? That's the thing I'm always fascinated by when people go and tour and they've never been somewhere before.
Right. So I've actually, the place that I have been before in Ireland, like I would have had already connections with those venues, and then as far as out in Eastern Europe or Germany and where else do I say, England, there's a what's it called, like a community, I suppose, of some sorts, or a music thing called So Far Sounds.
House concerts. They
shows,
do it here
pop-up
too.
Concerts,
right.
So I've actually gotten very well connected with some of the people who run it here, and I reached out on my own, and then some of the people that run it over here in Atlanta reached out themselves as well over to
nice,
using their connections. So I did get a handful of songs that way, or
gigs.
handful of gigs that way. And
well, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, so
the possibilities these days are so incredibly different.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just
and
10 years ago.
Exactly. And I got a couple of shows just by scouring the internet and seeing, who needs supporting act for this show, or is there like a songwriter's night on this night or that I can join? that are,
So were you just sending notes out saying, "Are you looking for? Do you need support?" Or were you choosing like, "I wonder if that guy I see he's touring." You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. I've done both. For this one, it is it's not so much of a tour as it is just an
introduction to Wyatt.
Yeah. Sort. Yeah. So it's like I'm going over there primarily for a visit, but I'm there for like a month and a half. So I'm touring.
That's a long visit.
Yeah. I mean, I used to live out there, so the shortest amount of time I go and usually visit for is like 3 months.
Oh, wow.
Because, I've got family over there and I'm a web designer. I can work
wherever I
need to. So, so those trips are, sure, I'll work more part-time, but if I can still work when I'm over there, I don't, I try to stay as long as I can.
Yeah. Well, it makes sense. If you can do it, that's awesome.
Yeah. But anyway, so I'm there a month and a half this time, and I wanted to, eventually I'm going to be moving there. And so I wanted to kind of get my feet wet as far as, places that I haven't played yet, and just to kind of see like, what
get a lay of the land of
exactly. See what it, see how I come across over there. Yeah. Rather than here,
Ugly American. That's how you're going to come across, man.
You
can just feel it. It just emanates. It comes off you.
Right. Yeah. This dirty American.
So how long have you been playing?
I've been playing guitar since I was middle school, high school area.
Did you pick it up because you just wanted to learn, or was it like a school? You had to do something in the band? Or?
Well, kind of both. I picked it up for fun, but I got started at school. So a couple of my friends would bring their guitars to school, and they'd play it at lunchtime. And so I asked if I could play it, and I kind of took to it, and I just kind of ran with it. So I didn't the initial like learning and figuring things out part kind of came pretty naturally, and then I've just plateaued for like the last couple of years. I'm like, I know enough to get by, and then like when it came to theory, I was like, man, I don't know anything.
Yeah.
It's getting better though. I've got a few friends that know a lot about theory, and they've been
they've been trying to guide you a little bit.
They're like, you got to know this, man. Like, you gotta.
But you know what? I talk to a lot of people, and there's some people that they don't even know what they're playing. They just play it.
Right. Yeah.
And they surround themselves with people who really know and care.
Right.
Like, hey, it's the same job done. Right. So songwriting for you, did that come naturally? Since the guitar came before you were like writing poetry on your own or anything, right?
No. I didn't even want to sing for a few, really ever, but especially a couple of years after. Like I'd already been playing guitar for a couple of years, and I didn't want to sing. I just wanted to play electric lead. And
who did you want to be? Who was your idol?
Oh man,
do you remember who you looked at?
As far as the guitarists go, not really. I didn't have any like.
You just knew you wanted to be the guy in the corner.
To be a guy with the guitar in the band. Yeah. So I didn't really know. I guess not. Yeah, that's an interesting question. I guess I don't know. I didn't really look up to any like solo guitarists, shredders, like. But as far as the guy who got me started singing, it'd have to be Dallas Green from City and Color. There's a band out of Ontario.
Oh, okay. No.
Yeah, so
the name's familiar to me, but I can't figure out why.
Right. Well, he's definitely my favorite. I mean, for the last decade, I've been listening to him and drawing inspiration, I suppose. So when I heard him sing, I wanted to start singing myself, because I didn't really feel any kind of like connection, I suppose, to a lot of other artists or their songs. I just, he has a cool sound. And
was that the thing? Do you think his sound was a little more distinctive, or was it his songwriting, or
both? All of it. Yeah, his style, his songwriting, his voice, all of it. It's just it was finally something that I could see doing, and being.
Is it because you could hear yourself in that same kind of phrasing that you said something about that delivery or that style of voice tells me, oh, I could do this too, then maybe.
Right. Yeah, well, I still don't think I could do it like quite like him.
Well, no,
like,
you're
like
never going to do it like him.
Yeah, or as far as being like not being as good as like I don't think I'll ever see that day. But
that's good. Have high hopes. Keep them low.
High hopes.
Keep those.
Yeah. So
that's reality.
I'm just trying to be as close as I can.
There you go.
When I everything that he was doing, like he was doing the whole acoustic thing, and he was also in another band called Alexis on Fire, which is more like the heavier music. You know, they got a screamer and everything, but he was still playing, like he was still singing.
Yeah,
he was still bringing the melody and the softness to the harder music. Which is also another thing I'm still wanting to do. Like I would love to be able to do. I'm talking to some friends of mine, and we're thinking about starting something along the same lines as a different project. But
right, just because you think it would be fun, but also kind of soothe a certain part of your brain that wants to do something different creatively.
Right. Yeah. A bit of both. I just kind of want to see what it's like, you know, because I feel like my voice might be able to lend itself to, you know, the harder side or the harsher side of music, and there's just, you know, urges to just rock out. You know,
yeah.
I just wanna,
it's like
turn it up.
Yeah. Have you ever listened to The Frames? Glenn Hansard.
Yeah, Glenn Hansard. Yeah. I was about to say
his voice. I mean, he's one of those characters that
right.
He got such incredible power in his voice, even when he sings just his acoustic solo.
Absolutely.
If he keeps it down, it's fine. But then all of a sudden, when he opens it up, you're like, oh my gosh, that voice
exactly
like shakes the roof.
Yeah. No, I love Glenn Hansard. He's great. I haven't listened to The Frames as much. Even as of late, I haven't really listened to. It's been a minute since I've listened to Glenn, but no, I'd say he's still probably one of my favorite artists. You know. Did you ever see his movie? Once?
Yeah, once.
Yeah, that was my favorite movie for a while.
Yeah, it's a good. I mean, it's still. I watched it again after it came out, and then I watched it again recently with my wife and my daughter. And so, you know, try to get your kid into music, and you're like, this is really good. And you realize now that the pace of that movie is really beautiful, but it is slow for a teenager. They don't necessarily. They're like, okay, when's the car chase? What's happening? Like,
yeah, I mean, I can see it.
But the music is powerful.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, I could see more people actually than I've anticipated have seen that movie. Like, if I ask someone who's seen that movie, they're like, oh, yeah, I've seen that movie. I'm like, really?
Yeah, I was I was surprised because, you know, I think it was probably the year after that came out. He toured. I don't know if you knew that with Marquita, who is the woman, the piano player, and they toured as the Swell Season. That was
I've heard of that.
And so they played Variety, and I thought nobody's going to know Swell Season. I go, you know, and they didn't see that movie and got there and it was packed. It was just packed, but it was also like being in the movie because his personality is really what that movie was about. But that's him.
Yeah.
So he just kind of owns the room and tells stories, and it was amazing.
I haven't met him yet, but I can see that. I feel like I know so many people that know him. Right. Like, just from living in Ireland. Ireland's a very small country. Right. And, you know, being a small country, they have smaller cities, but I mean, I guess Dublin's a pretty big city, but like, I would know, there's only so many circles to be in, you know, so.
Yeah, Atlanta's a huge city, but, you know, I tell people you're maybe 3 degrees separation from anybody.
I see the same people all the time.
Yeah, no matter where you are.
Mic, I see like 4 people I know.
Right, yeah. So. It is, especially once you get into creative endeavors, you know, where your circles cross. He's got a good, there's a YouTube movie out there, and I can't remember the name of the movie right now. I need to write it down. But it's about a traveling circus, kind of like a Cirque du Soleil, but it's with theater and music
Okay.
and poetry. And Glenn Hansard is one of the acts that he kind
really?
of like helped
really?
do it. Yeah. And it's this troupe that's been doing it for years, traveling, putting on full on like Shakespearean theater. But then they also do this mixed thing. And so they go into these little towns, like you say, like in Ireland, and they find a farmer who'll let them have a field.
Yeah.
And they set it up.
Right.
And then all the people in this small village that don't have anything else anyway, they're like, let's go on out there.
Yeah.
And then they have some of the talent is actually some of the people who live there too.
Right.
So
that's cool.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I'll find it. I'll send you a link, but it's it's fascinating. So what's your plan, man? Other than to start a new rock and roll band, you got recording in the works, or is that just something that maybe it's not really down the line, or
it actually is? It's down the line. Yeah, we're talking about, like, me and a few other people are discussing it. I've actually just signed on to Java Records, Atlanta, ATL. They're like. It's and Living Oak Studio. They're kind of like they're two separate parts of the same ownership, and so I've been just recently, like in the last like week or so, I've partnered with them. So we're now discussing like direction,
how and when,
and how and when. Yeah, exactly. So we're gonna just figuring out the ins and outs of like what needs to be done before we can. Get to tracking and
do you already have songs that you think you would like to
throw in, or? Yeah, I'm trying to refine a few of them, and I think I might try to re-record a couple songs, maybe like one or two songs that I feel like are really good, but I might not have captured the right feel the first time.
How'd you decide Java? How'd you decide that? Were these friends or folks that you just met?
Well, yeah, they're friends now. But
that's good.
Right, yeah. So I didn't know them before, like a few weeks ago. So I played a show in Canton, Georgia, and at what's it called? Oak House. It's like they have a listening room, songwriter session, and it's really, really cool. Like it's
in Canton too.
Yeah,
I mean, that's the thing.
Yeah, so I wasn't expecting. I don't know what I was expecting, but it was much better.
Well, how'd you book it? How'd you end up out there?
Right, so they had an open mic as well, so I went to the open mic. And,
you just saw an open mic and said, "I'll give that one a try."
Yeah, I was like, "Sure, I'll give that one a try." It's like a listening room environment, and I was like, "Okay, yeah, well, that's the appeal for us songwriters, people who you care to listen,
folks that will listen."
Yeah, so I went up and did the open mic, and they said, "Hey, you want to come back for our songwriters session?" I was like, "Sure." And then they ended up making me the headliner, which is cool. But I was like, "Well, this is my first show up here. Like, I pretty much have no draw."
Right, it's going to be hard to pull people.
I might have a couple friends up here, but
right.
Anyways, like. Not through any of my draw, but it was pretty much a packed house. It was really nice. Like there's a lot of heavy hitters that night. And anyways, all that to say, Living Oak Studio was there running the sound for the night, and they ended up coming to me afterwards, and we had a discussion, and then we continued the discussion a week later, and made the decision to
So now they signed a check for $1 million,
right?
So that you can now prepare yourself
for stardom.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. Well, I wish you the best of luck in making all those little connections come into play. Yeah. Well, if people want to find out what you're doing and where you're headed, what's the best way for them to do that?
Right now, it'd be Facebook and Instagram. Both under Clayton Wyatt. Actually, I think Instagram is Clayton Wyatt Music.
Because somebody else had Clayton Wyatt and you couldn't get it.
And we're discussing domain names right now because Clayton Wyatt is already taken. So we're figuring that out. Get a new website up and.
Or rename yourself so that way you can have the domain. Find a good domain and then.
I'll be Clayton Earp.
Yeah. There you go.
Something.
Clayton Wyatt Earp.
Clayton Wyatt Earp, yeah.
There you go. It could happen.
Right.
All right. Well, thanks for coming in, man. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. All right. My name is Clayton Wyatt, and this is a song of mine called Rockin' Chair. Let me tell you about the man over there. He spends his days in his rocking chair, away with the thought of life was better then. If I knew different, I would pity him. See, me and my old man aren't so different, burnt out on dreams with little sentiment. We hang on to what remains, in the hopes that something will come and change. So stubborn, resilient, it runs through our veins. And we'll never change. What blessed us before, it has become the curse that will follow us behind our hearse. And we'd learn a lot if we learned when to quit. If we set aside our pride just a little bit, I'll crawl into bed and I'll turn down the night. At least we got up from that old rocking chair. We hang on to what remains, in the hopes that something will come and change. So stubborn, resilient, it runs through our veins. So stubborn, it's in us. No quitters, it's in us. So stubborn, resilient, it runs through our veins. And we'll never change.
My name is Michael Halicki. I'm the executive director with Park Pride.
And, you know, you and I met not too long ago, and we talked, and I said, you know, I don't think a lot of people really get what Park Pride,
Right.
they hear the name, right?
Right.
They see it around. You guys do a
Right.
good job of getting it out there. But What is the main task?
So Park Pride's a nonprofit. We've been around for 30 years. This is our 30th anniversary, in fact. And our mission is to engage communities to activate the power of parks. And what that really translates into is we're not a membership organization. We think that every park should have a friends group or a conservancy. And we help to support groups within the city of Atlanta and DeKalb County, community folks who live around a park or would like to see a new park in their area. We try to provide support to help them have their dreams come true. And so our big idea is that the community has good ideas about great parks in their neighborhood, and we want to help them achieve that goal.
I got it. So when I hear, in our neighborhood, I'll say there's a Friends of Counter Park, or there's a Friends of Lake Claire Park. That's an organization that you guys can support in some ways to help get on their feet or figure out what they need to do.
And again, we kind of help to create the infrastructure that makes it so that groups can get involved at the local level. And for example, one of our earliest programs is a fiscal partner program that makes it so communities can raise dollars for their park and to use Park Pride's nonprofit tax status to do that. So it makes it so that volunteers that are interested in the local park, the first step isn't that they need to create a separate nonprofit. They can actually use our ability to make tax-deductible donations go into a restricted account for their local park. We also help to connect those different community groups to large groups that want volunteer projects. So we have folks that work on staff, and we have a tool cache. We also work with groups like the Atlanta Tool Bank to help to support large-scale volunteer projects. And we have 2 landscape architects on staff. So those are folks where for a total of 4 different parks per year, 2 in Atlanta and 2 in DeKalb, our landscape architects work with the community in a community-based visioning process to look at the vision for improving your local park. And in that situation, the city is not the client, the county is not the client, the community is the client, and ultimately coming up with what the community's vision is for what they would like to see in their park. And so in one part, that's an advocacy tool in talking to government officials to say, this is our vision for our park. It's a fundraising tool. It's also a sequencing, so you can look at the different steps to kind of move from the park you have to the park that you really desperately want and need. We also have a grant program. So there are foundations in Atlanta that rather than doling out those dollars towards those different groups, actually provide funding to Park Pride as the local park experts. And the idea that we leverage those dollars. They require the community to raise dollars. So community members need to match those dollars in a total of a dollar for dollar. But earlier this year in January, we announced our annual grant cycle was $860,000 going to 21 different neighborhood and community groups for improvements in their parks.
Wow. That is a lot.
Yeah.
That's a big mouthful, man.
That is.
You've been saying this for a while.
A little bit. Yeah. Well, it's a great story, and I will say,
is a great story.
When I first came to Park Pride, I thought of Park Pride as a parks and green space organization, but it really is that engaging communities to activate the power of parks, that it's really, and a lot of the folks that get involved with Park Pride, they see themselves first and foremost as neighborhood advocates. And they feel like if we can get this measurable win in our neighborhood to improve our park, that other good things can happen within our neighborhood. And it can become a rallying cry of not just what I'm against, but what I'm for, and making something good happen in their communities.
Yeah, it's a very interesting space that you guys possess. So is there kind of a connection, or how is your relationship with the city? Because you've got the city Atlanta Parks or DeKalb County Parks. I mean, how does that all play into this ecosystem?
I think it's a critical part of the conversation. Our offices are actually co-located with the Parks Department, so we have a small contract with the city of Atlanta that provides us with some direct support, although our total budget is around $1.4 million annually. The direct cash support we get from the city of Atlanta is $60,000. So the bulk of the dollars that we're raising are coming from sponsorships from things like our conference, from foundations, from individual donors who support the organization. Being co-located with the Parks Department does a couple of things for us. One, it makes it so that we have direct connections to not just the department, but the individual people who work in the department, so that we actually know those folks and they know us. And then by working with communities, we're kind of that liaison who can connect with communities, connect them with folks within the Parks Department, and make sure that all of that works. And we're kind of the trusted intermediary between the two, that we're never completely exactly where the city or county is, and we're never exactly where those communities are, but we can kind of speak both languages and work with different groups and help them to figure out ways to work together wherever at all possible. And in cases where there's areas of disagreement and that kind of thing, we can be a group that helps to work towards constructive solutions. So things like our grant program are a great example. I often say that communities that are told no, but here not yet, are the ones who ultimately prevail. And those grant dollars can make a big difference, where they might want to see something in their parks department and there's not enough money for it. But if they're raising dollars, they're able to leverage a Park Pride grant, that no can turn into a yes, and that you can kind of look at some of the different barriers and oppositions that are very reasonable reasons that we can't have all the different things that we'd like to see, but we figure out ways that people can be part of the solution.
So if there's a visioning, let's just say, I remember we went through a visioning of Lake Claire Park, in the past few years. That was city run, I believe. The city helped set that up.
And so the city does do some visioning plans that are actually done by the city. And if anything, I think that's shows some of the progress that we have had as an organization. That I often have heard it said that nonprofits, one of the goals is to work yourself out of a job and
to fix the problems that you're there to solve.
And so there was a time where there weren't any visioning capabilities within the City of Atlanta Parks Department, that they didn't have any landscape architects that were working on staff to actually work on elements of park design, that they would either contract out with landscape architects. Oftentimes they'd work through Park Pride, but they've actually gotten some capabilities. The person Walt Ray, who was with us for 11 years, went over and became the assistant director of park design for a number of years. Now he's working with the Trust for Public Land, where they're looking at a concept for a big regional park called Chattahoochee Riverlands, of kind of looking at all those areas around the Chattahoochee River. So, but since that time, they've added a number of different landscape architects that are working with the city. And if anything, we have more work to say grace over. So the fact that the city actually has landscape architects and that they have taken on a more community responsive kind of tenor to their efforts, I think is a sign of some of the progress that we've seen. And for that matter, I'll bring up the fact that I mentioned the Trust for Public Land, who's leading an effort with former Park Pride folks being involved in that effort. And then on the south east corner of the city, there's an idea for a South River Park. These are two big regional parks that grew out of a citywide planning effort known as Atlanta City Design. And again, you have national nonprofits like the Nature Conservancy and Trust for Public Land that are leading community-centered efforts to look at big regional parks in those areas. So we found that, if anything, to folks that aren't in the don't do this for a living, it might seem a little chaotic with all the different players, but if anything, it's bringing additional resources to the table. The city has really learned from 3 decades of working with Park Pride that if you can't beat them, join them. They're doing some of the things that we used to do, and if anything, I think they're a good complement. And it's made it so that they're also more responsive in terms of they're working right now on a city master plan effort. And I think recognizing that the vision for that plan isn't just what's the role of city, but what are the roles of the nonprofits like Park Pride, what is the role of the community in helping to get to that ultimate vision of where we want to be.
So if somebody wanted to, let's say they knew in their neighborhood, their area, there was a green space that was not designated officially a park. Is there a process or procedure that somebody would go through that Park Pride might help, shepherd them to a good result?
So as I mentioned, we do have a grant program that helps to support improvements in different parks. The first question is kind of site control on whether or not that land is owned. In some cases, you have land that's actually owned by the city, but it's not a public park. You also have, right now, we're also exploring a pilot project with the Trust for Public Land and the Urban Land Institute, looking at school play lots and the idea that could we improve some of these different play lots and then make it so that they're accessible as green space within those neighborhoods and not locked during the summer and on the weekends, so that people have access to those types of places. There's on the side of things of land acquisition, that's one area that we don't have people on staff that actually work through the process of purchasing land on behalf of the city. And the main reason for that is groups like the Conservation Fund and the Trust for Public Land have a long history of doing that kind of thing. They also have access to revolving funds and other types of things that allow them to access dollars, so that as they're working through the process of the city acquiring that land, they can be kind of the land, they can kind of hold that land. But we can connect folks to those types of resources that are out there. So I think that, I mean, if you're interested in parks in your neighborhood, I would encourage you to connect with Park Pride. And if we're not the answer to the solution that you've got, we can certainly direct you towards the organization that really leads that specific effort.
Yeah. So how did you come into this picture, Michael? How did Park Pride, were you a volunteer before? Were you just like parks?
I like parks. I will say that I've worked for the past 20 years working for different environmental causes, and started off more working in the communications and policy side of things. So years ago, I worked for the Georgia Conservancy as their communications director and later as their policy director. I worked for a group called the Clean Air Campaign that was focused more on encouraging people to drive less and carpool, take transit, and telework. Around that time, I went back and did a master's in public administration focused on nonprofit management, and really wanted to move out of being kind of involved on the communications and policy side of things and actually running a nonprofit. And my last job before coming to my current role was working for South Face Energy Institute as their COO. So South Face is a group that works on green building and sustainability. As the COO, I had responsibilities of really kind of managing the organization, which again was something that drew upon my graduate work in that area. But I live in the Ormwood Park area. I've got 2 kids that are now ages 10 and 14. I really have a passion for parks, all kinds of parks, national parks, state parks, local parks. And when the position became available, that this position was open, and the opportunity to actually work on a hyper-local level to make the world a better place, I jumped and came to Park Pride 5.5 years ago. And we'll say that the other thing is, when I came to the organization, I really thought of Park Pride as an environmental organization in the same mold of the environmental organizations I'd come from. And came to the organization and really realized it was more that engaging community that was really the differentiator with Park Pride, and really what separated the organization and what made it different. And it's really that community engagement side of things of why I'm still here. If anything, I've kind of moved from being a sustainability or an environmentalist that's a generalist into someone who really kind of found that this whole message of engaging communities in their local parks, and why local parks do things that other parks, the idea of like a big regional park is a great thing. And people come in from out of town, you take them to, the Piedmont Park and a number of different places. And those are great places that are of great value and benefit for everyone in the city. But they're not necessarily your everyday park. For some people they are, but for so many other people who can't afford to live right next to Piedmont Park.
There's special event parks.
They're a special event park. They're, take my neighbor to my out-of-town visitor to historic Fourth Ward and show them this amazing park and go have lunch at Pond City Market. But it's really your neighborhood parks where kids have a chance for active play every day, those places that you can kind of schedule in regular experiences to connect with nature. They're places where you get to know your neighbors and you really build community, that it isn't just I would say that neighborhoods without parks are just housing. That parks are the places that get people out of those houses and actually getting to know one another. And sometimes that's hanging out while the kids are playing at the playground and that kind of thing. But I've really found that important role that local parks play is really something that I think is a life-changing experience. And it's something that I think needs more and more attention as we're getting more disconnected as a society. Divisive politics and people thinking the worst of people whenever they see them, as opposed to thinking that they might actually be more like them than they might realize. So I think that there's a special role that parks play in our neighborhoods, and I've really found that isn't just a way to contribute globally on a local level, but in some ways the locality and the kind of the localism kind of elements of that are more important in some ways than that bigger picture environment side of things. So I've become hooked on just the important role that we play, and I think that Park Pride is one of those groups that brings together so many different Atlantans all together in one place. We show up down at City Hall to advocate for more funding for park maintenance every year, and you will have people from very different neighborhoods that are shoulder to shoulder wearing green shirts showing up to say we all care about parks.
Yeah.
So it really is a life-changing organization, and I think I've come to appreciate the role that local parks play through this role that I'm excited talking about.
Oh yeah. I mean I'm lucky enough to live in town, myself, and so I don't really think of parks the same way you do. Like I walked my kids every day to elementary school through Candler Park,
right?
And I feel like they had a very idyllic lifestyle, and they may reflect on that one day. They may not. I thought as a parent I did, because I'd pick them up from school and I'd walk through the park on the way home and just stop, and there's a playground.
Right.
And so that was every day.
Right.
So that was our time, to bond, for them to play. And without that park, walking along the streets wouldn't have been quite the same.
Yeah. Well, and along those lines, there is an element of this that people think of parks as just a nice to have as opposed to a core essential. And there's an increasing body of research, and the parallel that's made in this research of the importance of access to nature is looking at the way that we used to treat animals in zoos a generation ago. And it used to be that Willie B was sitting in front of the TV behind bars as opposed to being out in an approximation of his habitat. These days, when you look at zoos, and Zoo Atlanta is a good example, that trying to approximate the natural habitat is something that isn't just an educational kind of experience for those that are coming to visit the zoo and to see the animals, but it actually makes a difference in terms of the health and the vitality of those animals themselves. And it's amazing how dramatically the lifespans are negatively impacted when they actually take them out of their environment and put them into a place where they're basically in zoo jail.
Right.
And there's a lot of different, there's a strong parallel there to looking at the experience for people growing up in urban environments that don't have access to nature and their natural habitats, and looking at the impacts in terms of their physical well-being, their mental and emotional health, and so many different things, that we are not hardwired to be in these cages in a similar kind of sense. So parks can play an important role in the idea that, again, it isn't just something that's once in a blue moon that you go to this park once a year or something like that. There are places that you're going to every day because you need it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And particularly looking at young people and kids, that they need it as part of their kind of maturation to have those experiences in nature.
Yeah. No, when I think of growing up, I grew up in Dorville and Dunwoody, and my memories were going out, oftentimes living in apartment complexes, but they'd have some type of green space, and that green space is where you'd meet, and that's where you'd hang out. But it's the same thing now. I'm lucky that we have a variety of pockets or pocket parks around us that we can go, you can take the dogs for a walk and the family can get a stretch of the legs, and you'll see neighbors, and you figure out this is it, but it represents your home too. It's like that's your neighborhood.
Yeah. The other thing that's new, I think, just in terms of this whole conversation, is the important role that the Emerging Trail Network is playing in the city of Atlanta. And people
is that a network, or is that a movement when you say Emerging Trail Network?
Well, I look at it as oftentimes the conversation starts with the Kevin Bacon of trails, which is the Atlanta Beltline, but there's so many other different trail systems. Path, I think, has done a very quiet role of quietly building this whole trail network. But the East Side Trail really changed the conversation on trails from something that we're really seeing as just benefits for cyclists to get off the road from automobiles and actually destinations in and of themselves. And so trails have also started to take on more of a flavor of being linear parks, and the idea that you can actually connect these different parts of our city together through trails, that there's a range of different types of trails, some of which are more kind of natural, almost hiking trail kinds of experiences in nature parks, and some that are more transportation oriented. But I find that trails are bringing a number of different constituencies to the table that before weren't as active or weren't as vocal in terms of the importance of parks, and are really seeing how these actually help to knit our communities together in a very positive way. And it really, I think, is responsible for changing the conversation for the better, that there are people that were parks people, they just didn't know it yet. And then they have the experience. And when you think about how the East Side Trail is a good example, where the vision there is not that everyone has an opportunity to get in their cars and go drive to a place where they can go walk on a walkable trail and have this great experience. It's the idea that we should all have access to those types of places. And for that matter, when you actually start going to those different trails, you start looking around and saying, you need destinations for those types of things. So interesting places to eat, and having different places of connection for the community, but also additional parks, places to go to as well. So I just think that the emerging trail network has been something that is started with the Atlanta Beltline, but really has blossomed into this conversation of a number of different important trail projects that oftentimes are spurs off of the Atlanta Beltline. And then the Path Network that has been out there for quite some time, but I think was perceived as just a bike lane area, and people are starting to see that it's so much more than that.
Yeah. No, there's, for so many people, the Beltline, or the parts of the Beltline, the East Side Trail, as you say, is the only part, or it's the first time Atlanta's ever thought about putting something like this out. But there have been people working for, 50, 60 years, creating trails and trying to put them in. And some of them they're all over, Northeast Atlanta, outside the perimeter, inside the perimeter. They're all around, but it's how you see that kind of that confluence of where they come together and how they can. I think that's what the Beltline allows you to see it through that lens, kind of.
Well, there's also a reporter from the New York Times who once said that the Beltline was the city's first major project that was a gift to its existing residents. And when you think about one of my big experiences, I moved to Atlanta in '94, and I actually worked on the Olympics. And so having that Olympic experience, we just had the Super Bowl that happened. And so we have these different events where the city is the backdrop, but the world is showcasing Atlanta. And it seems like that's a certain narrative that Atlanta is very comfortable telling. But it's interesting to me to see how a lot of the different trail projects, and I think the Beltline is a good example, that it winds up having some benefits on a national level in terms of our city brand and that kind of thing. But that's not why we're doing it. It actually is something that actually connects all these, Atlanta's strengths, I think, first and foremost, are our neighborhoods. And this is something that knits all those different neighborhoods together. And I think it provides an opportunity for connecting those different neighborhoods and connecting all of us together in an interesting way. Now, I do think that the Beltline has also been on the front of the conversation on gentrification and affordability that's happening in our city. I also would say if we didn't have the Beltline, we'd still be having the issues as it relates to the gentrification and affordability issues. And so I think, if anything, it kind of puts the Beltline into a place of primacy, that it's kind of front and center stage on how we're resolving these different issues, which again I think is a very positive thing of actually having a way to help to engage on these types of issues and start to look for innovative solutions, as opposed to looking at the problem citywide, in which case there's really nowhere to kind of latch on that everybody cares about, because it's either in my neighborhood or it's not.
Right. Yeah, that is different.
Yeah.
Well, so does Park Pride do other kinds of events? Do they do public entity things, or how do you fundraise and things of that nature?
So the big event that we have that's coming up is our Parks and Greenspace Conference, and it's March 25th at the Botanical Garden. And this is an event where the tulips are in bloom. We bring in national caliber speakers that are folks that have done TED Talks and things along those lines that get people very excited about the potential for the coming year of making things happen with parks. Last year we had Mayor Bottoms actually showed up and spoke and actually announced a project of putting in green infrastructure in a series of different parks. So used it as kind of a policy platform. But it's a great event where people will get a chance to hear about some of the great things that are happening in local parks all over the city of Atlanta and DeKalb. We have a couple of tours that happen right before the conference to get people out and about, including a bicycle tour on Freedom Park. That is something that we're working with the Freedom Park Conservancy as a partner. We also have a tour that's happening at Southside Park, which is typically a ball field park, but they've also put together a mountain biking trail that is in the process of being expanded on, and they're working diligently to actually get it completed so that it is done for that Saturday before the conference for a big kind of community day. REI is going to come out, and they're bringing a pump track for mountain biking that's going to be there. And just inviting people out. There's no cost to attend for that, and just getting folks out.
Yeah, what's a pump track?
So a pump track is kind of like a little mini mountain biking roller coaster that is a circle, and it's something that's fun with kids that has a number of different rises and things along those lines, and you can kind of ride in a circle. Again, there's a mountain biking trail that's right over there as well. So it's just kind of a little...
So it's more like a small velodrome of sorts.
Exactly,
that has different...
Yeah.
Oh.
But the conference is a great event, and it is the kind of thing that there will be folks from the local Friends of the Park groups, conservancies. There'll be folks from the Parks Department and other city agencies, some national and county government folks that show up as well, park designers, so folks that work in landscape architecture and playground manufacturers. So it's kind of a range of this broader community that all come together. We have folks that come from other parts of the state and from other states that actually show up as well.
How long have you been doing that?
It's this is our 18th year of doing the Parks and Green Space Conference. And again, the organization, this is our 30-year anniversary. So this is a big milestone year for the organization as a whole.
What started it?
It was actually started by a parks commissioner who created an advisory board to help think about kind of how do we go beyond the limitations of government. And quickly that group organized into a 501c3 nonprofit organization. Over the first year, there was a person that was kind of donated on staff to the organization, and the effort was done out of the Parks Department's offices.
Wow.
A woman named Allison Barnett joined the organization about a year later as the associate director, and she's still with the organization and is kind of the my right-hand woman in terms of making everything happen within the organization. These days, we have a total staff of 14 that work, again, with our offices being co-located with Atlanta's Parks Department and also having office spaces in DeKalb as well.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's a neat. You've got everything down on a package, man. You know exactly how to phrase it. I can tell your communications background.
Well, thank you. Like I said, it's been interesting for me because they say that if that it's not selling if you're doing what you love, and I really have found that this organization is unlike any other. I think that it's really doing great work, and I would encourage folks that are listening to get involved with their local parks and looking at the conservancies and Friends of the Park groups where you can actually make a difference, and then think about what are different talents or abilities of ways that you can contribute. So, these organizations need fundraisers, they need communications folks, they need sweat equity, people doing volunteer service in parks. But there's a lot of different things that you can do to be a positive part of this larger movement, and also to help support your local neighborhood. And as I said, Park Pride can help to connect you with those different group folks, neighbors of yours who are similarly minded, and really for you to play a role of being the change you wish to see in the world.
So if I have a park, but there isn't a Friends of group as part of it, is that something that I can just start?
Yes. Yes,
so
and we'll help you do that, and that's really how organically it's happened over time.
Yeah, because I think a lot of times people don't realize that their local park, you may see people working on it one weekend, and you might even notice their neighbors, but you don't realize,
right,
are they organized or not? And if they move, then what happens to that workforce?
Right.
And it's because there isn't an entity that sometimes you can suffer.
Well, and along those lines, we just had an event this past Saturday at the zoo where we pulled together 120 representatives from different Friends of the Park groups throughout our entire network together. And they all showed up from 10 to 1 to hear from each other, to play games. We did kind of prices right on how much does it cost for a park bench or a trash can, because you'll be surprised how expensive those things are when you build them to the specs that are required for the Parks Department. So we got that whole group together, and part of the whole idea there is we again have a staff that work hand in hand and help to connect people with both resources and knowledge to make things happen. But one of the best ways that groups can learn about what to do in my park is from other groups who've already done it.
Yeah.
And so we're really trying to move towards making it easier for folks to connect with other folks, not just in your own neighborhood, but other advocates who have had success, and learning from their example and having those folks help to mentor folks and bring them along.
Yeah. Well, how many parks are there in the city and county, or how do you divide that? Is it the city line that's sometimes in Fulton, sometimes in DeKalb? That's what your realm is?
So the jurisdictions that we work are the City of Atlanta, DeKalb County, and we also we work in unincorporated DeKalb. So as we've had new cities that have formed, we don't work in each of those different jurisdictions, in part because this co-location arrangement and that kind of thing, that as new cities have formed, we don't have the resources and capacities to put a person in those different locations. But interestingly enough, both Brookhaven and Tucker have signed agreements and helped to support a person that works just in DeKalb and supporting the Friends groups in DeKalb, Tucker, and Brookhaven, and then one person within the City of Atlanta that helps those Friends of the Park groups. And we've got around 110 Friends of the Park groups in all of those different jurisdictions, all combined. But looking at the total number of parks, when you're looking at not just kind of, there are some beauty spots and traffic circles and things like that, but about 200 parks in the City of Atlanta, and slightly less than that in DeKalb. And then in these smaller cities, it's just a handful. You have a dozen to no more than 20 parks in those different jurisdictions.
200. I mean, 200 in the city. I don't think anybody has fathoms.
Right.
But then it is, like you said, you have to get into the neighborhoods to find the parks.
Right. Well, and then there's also new parks that are coming online every day. So there's a lot of excitement right now on the Bellwood Quarry that's being turned into the West Side Park, which will be a park larger than Piedmont Park, for example. So you have a range of different sizes of parks that do different things. Yeah. And again, it isn't necessarily just that the large parks are the ones that make the difference. That in some cases, pocket parks can make a huge difference in terms of providing some a spot of nature or a playground and things like that for families. And in some ways, having that dispersion is in some ways more important than the total acreage. The Trust for Public Land does an annual ranking of park systems nationally to look at different cities, and we're ranked in that whole system. And they also look at park access. So about a third of Atlantans currently do not live within a 10-minute walk of a park. And that number, since we've added the Atlanta Beltline and have been moving forward with some of these different parks, we've gone from really at the bottom of the list in terms of park access to kind of middle of the road. So right now our park ranking is 42nd out of 100 U.S. cities. And that's up from the year prior, it was 50th out of 100 U.S. cities. So we're moving in the right direction, but we have a ways to go. And many people are surprised by that, because thinking of Atlanta being such a forested city, the city in the forest, to find out that we're underparked compared to other cities of our size comes as a surprise to folks. And but by the same token, when you're looking down from an airplane and you're looking at that tree canopy, most of that tree canopy you're looking at is not publicly held. Only about 5% of the total land area in the city of Atlanta is public park.
Lesson upon lesson. Thank you.
Yeah.
This is, if people want to get involved, if they want to get involved in Park Pride, or they have some questions, what's the best way for them to do that?
Our website would probably be the easiest place. If you go to parkpride.org, you can find out about volunteer projects. You can send us a message and connect with our Friends of the Park program. You can register for the Parks and Green Space Conference on March 25th. We also do a monthly Friends of the Park meeting that's at the ungodly hour of 7:30 in the morning every month.
The parks are open, so you should be there.
Right. And we move it around, so every month we're at a different park, and it's really a good chance to meet some of these diehard park enthusiasts who show up at 7:30 in the morning to kind of commiserate with one another and to learn about a different park within the system. And that's something we do every month. So there's most weekends we have a volunteer project that's going on. So there's lots of different ways to get involved, but our website is the good place to start.
No limit of opportunities. That's
right.
The good thing.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for coming, man. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. I'm glad you had me.
Well, that's it for another Good Gracious Show podcast. That was interesting, wasn't it? Some good folks there. If you enjoyed the story, please share with friends and family. Just forward and say, hey, you ought to check this out, whether it's the music or what's going on with Park Pride. And there's ways you can get involved with those things. That's the whole point of this, is that you learn about them now. Go get their CD. Go visit them. Go volunteer. Get engaged. Be part of the broader Southern community of musicians, artists, and change makers, because it's a really incredible group. A culture that we have here. So you can find more information at goodgracioushow.com, as well as reach us on Facebook, Twitter, all that. You can listen to all these podcasts just online if you want. Just stream them from the website. Or if you want to download it, go ahead. Get that RSS feed. Get it on your phone or your device. And you can check it wherever you like to listen to podcasts. So otherwise, mark your calendar, May 4th. Good Gracious Show is coming up. And until we meet again, be a good neighbor, hug someone, and we'll see you next week.